The signal came on a Tuesday morning while Sarah Chen was drinking her coffee at the Space Command headquarters. She almost choked when the message played through the speakers. After decades of scanning the stars for signs of alien life, the aliens had found them first. "This is Ambassador Kethva of the Galactic Confederation," the translated voice said. "We require immediate assistance. Our people are dying." Sarah set down her coffee cup with shaking hands. As the newly appointed captain of humanity's first deep space vessel, she had trained for many scenarios. None of them involved aliens begging for help. The message continued for several minutes, explaining that the Zalani species faced total extinction from a plague. 17 different alien civilizations had tried to help them. All had failed. Now they were asking the newest species they had discovered, humans, to try where others could not succeed. Dr. Marcus Webb arrived at the briefing room before Sarah finished listening to the message for the third time. Marcus was Earth's best virus expert, a thin man with tired eyes who had spent his career fighting diseases that killed millions. Behind him came Commander James Torres, head of security for the mission. James was the opposite of Marcus. Broad shoulders, quick smile, and the kind of person who made everyone feel safer just by being in the room. "So it's real," Marcus said, looking at the translation device on the table. "Actual aliens. And they're sick. Very sick," Sarah replied, pulling up the data they had sent. "Look at these numbers. They've lost 60% of their population in the last 2 years. Their medicine is more advanced than ours, but nothing works." James studied the star charts, showing the location of Zalani space. "It's a 3-week journey at maximum speed. If we're going to help, we need to leave soon." Sarah nodded. The decision felt impossible and inevitable at the same time. Humanity's first contact with alien life would be a medical mission to save a dying civilization. 3 days later, the UES Perseverance launched from Earth orbit. The ship carried 50 of humanity's best doctors, scientists, and engineers. Sarah watched Earth shrink behind them and wondered if they were flying toward humanity's greatest triumph or biggest mistake. The journey gave them time to study everything the Zalani had sent about their condition. The aliens had shared medical data that made Marcus shake his head in amazement. Their knowledge of biology far exceeded anything humans had achieved. They could cure cancers with a simple injection and repair damaged organs with machines smaller than cells. "If they can do all this," Dr. Webb said during one of their daily meetings, "what could be killing them that we might understand better?" Sarah had been wondering the same thing. The Zalani described their plague as something that attacked their breathing system and nervous system at the same time. Victims became weak, then confused, then died within days. It spread through the air and seemed to mutate faster than their medicine could adapt. "Maybe," James suggested, "we're not better doctors. Maybe we're just different." When the Perseverance reached Zalani space, Sarah felt her breath catch in her throat. The alien ships that met them were beautiful beyond description, smooth curves of metal that seemed to flow like water, powered by energy sources that left no visible exhaust. Compared to these elegant vessels, the human ship looked like a metal box with engines attached. The Zalani escort led them to their home world, and Sarah got her first look at an alien planet. Cities of crystal and light covered the surface, connected by transparent tubes that carried transportation pods at incredible speeds. Everything looked clean and perfect, as if the entire world had been designed by artists. But as they flew closer, Sarah noticed something wrong. Many of the crystal buildings were dark. The transportation tubes carried very few pods. The beautiful cities looked empty. Ambassador Kethva met them at the spaceport, and Sarah got her first look at an alien being. The Zalani were tall and thin, with pale blue skin that seemed almost transparent. Their large eyes reflected light like mirrors, and they moved with a grace that made humans look clumsy by comparison. But Kethva looked tired, and her mirror eyes seemed dim, Captain. "Chen," Kethva said in perfect English, "thank you for coming. I apologize that our first meeting must be under such terrible circumstances." Sarah bowed slightly, unsure of alien customs. "We're honored to meet you, Ambassador. We'll do everything we can to help." Kethva led them through the spaceport, which should have been busy with travelers from across the galaxy. Instead, it felt like walking through a museum after closing time. Their footsteps echoed in the vast, empty spaces. "Our people now live in isolation chambers," Kethva explained as they walked. "We have learned that contact spreads the plague faster. Only those of us who work in essential services risk exposure." Dr. Webb looked around at the sterile, empty corridors. "How long have your people lived in such clean environments?" Clean environments? Kethva seemed confused by the question. "We have always maintained proper hygiene standards. Disease was eliminated from our world over 1,000 years ago, before we joined the Confederation." Marcus and Sarah exchanged glances. A species that had eliminated all disease would have no natural resistance to new illnesses. They reached the medical center where Zalani doctors worked in sealed suits to treat plague victims. Through transparent walls, Sarah could see patients lying motionless on beds, their blue skin even paler than normal. Machines monitored their vital signs, but the displays showed declining numbers across the board. Dr. Sektar, the chief medical officer, showed them recordings of the plague's progression. "It begins with difficulty breathing," she explained. "Then confusion, loss of coordination, and finally complete system failure. Our most advanced treatments have no effect." Marcus studied the medical data with growing recognition. "The symptoms, they're familiar. May I examine some tissue samples?" For the next 6 hours, Marcus worked with Zalani equipment that made Earth's most advanced laboratories look primitive. But as the hours passed, his expression grew more troubled instead of hopeful. Finally, he called Sarah and James to a private room. "I know what's killing them," he said quietly. "And the news is very bad." "What is it?" Sarah asked. Marcus rubbed his tired eyes. "It's us. Or rather, it's something from Earth. The plague shows all the signs of a common cold virus that has mutated to survive in alien biology." James stared at him. "A cold? You're saying a common cold is wiping out an entire civilization?" "Think about it," Marcus said. "Humans live with thousands of viruses and bacteria every day. We sneeze, cough, touch things, breathe the same air as sick people. Our immune systems are trained by constant battle. But the Zalani have lived in perfect, sterile conditions for 1,000 years. To them, our weakest germs are weapons of mass destruction." Sarah felt cold despite the warm air in the medical center. "How did Earth viruses get here? We've never been to space before now." "Meteorites," Marcus said. "Space debris. Even radio signals can carry microscopic particles across vast distances. Something from Earth made it here first, and when it met beings with no natural defenses, he didn't need to finish. They all understood. Humanity's first contact with alien life had accidentally started a plague that was destroying an entire civilization." "Can we cure it?" Sarah asked. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "Maybe, but the cure might be more dangerous than the disease." Outside, their private room, Ambassador Kethva waited patiently for news, hoping that the young species from the distant world called Earth might succeed where 17 more advanced civilizations had failed. She had no idea that Earth had already succeeded, beyond her worst nightmares. Dr. Marcus Webb stood in front of Ambassador Kethva and the assembled Zalani medical team, knowing that his next words would either save a civilization or destroy any hope of peaceful relations between humans and aliens. "The plague killing your people," Marcus began carefully, "comes from my world, Earth." The silence in the medical center stretched for long seconds. Kethva's mirror eyes seemed to grow even dimmer as she processed this information. "You brought this disease to us?" Dr. Sektar asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not intentionally," Sarah said quickly. "We think microscopic particles from Earth reached your space long before we did. Maybe on asteroids or comets. When they encountered your people." "We became a weapon without knowing it," Marcus finished. "But that also means we might be the cure." Kethva straightened slightly. "Explain." Marcus activated a holographic display showing human and Zilani biology, side by side. "Your people eliminated disease from your world centuries ago. Your immune systems never learned to fight. But humans live with thousands of viruses and bacteria every day. We carry antibodies to diseases that would kill most galactic species." "You're saying humans are immune to our plague?" Dr. Sektar asked. "More than immune," Marcus replied. "We're walking medicine factories. Our blood contains the antibodies needed to fight this infection. But there's a problem." James Torres crossed his arms. "There's always a problem." Marcus highlighted several sections of the biological comparison. "Human antibodies are designed for human biology. To make them work for Zilani, we need to modify them. And the only way to create the right antibodies is to expose humans to controlled versions of Earth's most common diseases." "You want to make yourself sick?" Kethva asked, unable to hide her shock. "Very sick," Marcus confirmed. "Measles, chickenpox, influenza, the common cold, diseases that humans consider minor annoyances but would kill most alien species. We need to catch all of them at once to produce the right immune response." The Zilani doctors exchanged glances that clearly communicated their horror at the suggestion. Sarah understood their reaction. To a species that had lived in sterile perfection for 1,000 years, deliberately causing illness seemed like madness. "I'll go first," James announced, surprising everyone in the room. "James, no," Sarah started to protest. "Captain, think about it. If this works, we save their entire civilization. If it doesn't work, we're just sick humans, which we've been dealing with our whole lives." James looked at the Zilani. "Besides, someone needs to test the process before we risk the medical team." Dr. Sektar stepped forward. "Commander Torres, you don't understand. The diseases Dr. Webb described would cause system-wide organ failure in any Zilani within hours. Watching you deliberately infect yourself with these pathogens would be like watching you commit suicide." James smiled, the expression that had reassured so many humans over the years. "Then you're about to learn something important about my species." 2 days later, James lay in a medical bed surrounded by Zilani doctors who monitored every aspect of his vital signs. Marcus had infected him with modified versions of measles, a mild flu strain, and the common cold. To human standards, it was like having a bad week. To the Zilani watching, it looked like torture. James's temperature spiked to levels that would have killed a Zilani instantly. His body ached. He coughed constantly, and red spots appeared on his skin from the measles. But he remained conscious, alert, and even managed to joke with the medical staff. "How are you still functional?" Dr. Sektar asked as she reviewed readings that showed internal inflammation throughout James's body. "Practice," James replied, then dissolved into a coughing fit that made the Zilani doctor step back in alarm. By the 3rd day, James was feeling better, but his blood showed antibody levels that made Marcus excited. "It's working," he announced to the gathered medical team. "His immune system is producing exactly what we need." Ambassador Kethva watched through the observation window as James sat up in bed, ate solid food, and discussed the medical readings with Dr. Webb. 3 days. Earlier, the human had deliberately infected himself with diseases that would have wiped out entire Zilani cities. Now he was recovering as if nothing had happened. "Your species is terrifying," she said quietly to Sarah. "We prefer resilient," Sarah replied. The first test came when they synthesized James's antibodies and gave them to a Zalani patient who was hours from death. Dr. Sekatar administered the treatment while the entire medical team watched the monitors. For the first hour, nothing changed. The patient's breathing remained labored. His neural activity continued to decline. Then, slowly, the vital signs began to stabilize. By the end of the day, the patient was conscious and asking for food. Word spread through the Zalani medical community like wildfire. The impossible had happened. A dying patient had recovered from the plague. But when Dr. Sekatar explained that the cure came from deliberate human infection with deadly diseases, many refused to believe it. More human volunteers stepped forward. Dr. Lisa Chen, the ship's biologist, infected herself with chickenpox and strep throat. Engineer Mike Rodriguez took on influenza and a stomach virus. Within a week, half the human crew was deliberately sick with diseases that would have depopulated Zalani worlds. The Zalani medical staff watched in fascination and horror as humans worked through fevers, functioned with infections, and treated symptoms that would have been fatal to aliens as temporary inconveniences. Dr. Webb continued his research while fighting off pneumonia. Sarah ran the ship's operations with a temperature that would have put any Zalani in intensive care. "They're not getting medical treatment," Dr. Sekatar observed to Ambassador Kethva. "They're just enduring it." Dr. Webb explained that human immune systems need to fight the infections naturally to produce the right antibodies, Kethva replied. But watching them work while their bodies fight multiple diseases simultaneously, it's like nothing in our medical literature. The breakthrough came when Marcus realized that human antibodies worked better if administered by humans directly. The biological compatibility was higher when living humans, still fighting off infections, provided treatment through direct contact. This created a new problem. For the treatment to work, humans needed to spend extended time in close contact with Zalani patients. But to the aliens, this was like inviting walking biological weapons into their sterile medical facilities. "We'll need to set up treatment centers where humans can work directly with patients," Marcus explained to a gathering of Zalani officials. "Physical contact improves the treatment effectiveness by almost 300%. The room fell silent. Several Zalani officials stepped back unconsciously. "You're asking us to let disease carriers touch our people," one official said. "We're asking you to let doctors save your people," Sarah replied firmly. "Yes, we carry diseases. We also carry the cure." Ambassador Kethva stood slowly. "I understand this violates every safety protocol we've maintained for centuries, but our current protocols are watching our species die." She looked around the room at her fellow officials. "I'm authorizing direct human Zalani medical contact. The decision split Zalani society. Conservative factions demanded that the aliens maintain isolation protocols even if it meant extinction. Progressive factions supported accepting human help despite the risks. But as news spread that human treatment was actually saving lives, more Zalani chose hope over fear. Dr. Webb established the first mixed human Zalani medical facility in the capital city. Human doctors, still recovering from deliberate infections, worked side by side with Zalani physicians who had never been exposed to disease in their lives. The cultural shock went both ways. Humans watched Zalani doctors work with technology that seemed like magic. Zalani physicians observed humans function normally while battling infections that would have killed anyone else in the galaxy. "Dr. Webb," Dr. Sekatar said during their third week of collaboration, "your people are changing how we understand medicine itself." Marcus looked up from a patient who was responding well to treatment. "How so?" "We've always believed that health meant the absence of disease. But watching humans, we're learning that true health might mean the ability to fight disease." Outside the medical center, Ambassador Kethva received reports that human-treated Zalani were not just surviving the plague. They were developing stronger immune systems than any Zalani had possessed in over 1,000 years. The cure was working. But like all human solutions, it came with consequences no one had anticipated. 3 months after the first human Zalani medical facility opened, Ambassador Kethva received a report that made her question everything she thought she knew about her own species. The young Zalani who work with humans are behaving strangely, reported Dr. Veltar, one of the senior medical administrators. They're taking unnecessary risks, eating unsterilized food, and working extended hours without proper rest cycles. Kethva studied the data on her screen. Zalani, who had spent weeks in close contact with human medical teams, were indeed showing behavioral changes that worried the traditional leadership. But the same Zalani were also showing remarkable improvements in problem-solving abilities and stress management. Define unnecessary risks, Kethva requested. Yesterday, medical technician Zareth walked outside during a minor atmospheric disturbance without protective equipment. When questioned, she said the human Dr. Webb had explained that a little rain never hurt anyone. She seemed to find the experience enjoyable. Kethva felt a chill of concern. For over 1,000 years, Zalani had avoided any exposure to uncontrolled environmental conditions. Yet now, some of her people were actively seeking such experiences. At the main medical center, Dr. Marcus Webb was teaching a group of young Zalani physicians about human immune responses when he noticed something interesting. The Zalani students were asking questions that went far beyond medical curiosity. "Dr. Webb," asked Zareth, the technician who had walked in the rain, "humans eat food that contains living bacteria. How do you determine which bacteria are safe?" "Experience. Mostly," Marcus replied. "We try things, see what happens, and learn from the results." "But what if the results are harmful?" Marcus shrugged, a gesture the Zalani had learned to recognize as very human. "Then we get sick, recover, and know better next time. The key is not to try anything too dangerous all at once." The concept seemed to fascinate the young Zalani. Dr. Sektar, who had been observing the exchange, approached Marcus later with concerns. "Your teaching methods are having unexpected effects on our youth," she said. "They're beginning to question safety protocols that have protected our species for centuries." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "Dr. Sektar, can I ask you something? Before the plague, when did your people last face a real challenge? Something that required adaptation or innovation?" The question caught her off guard. We solved most major challenges long ago. Our society has been stable and peaceful for over 800 years. And in those 800 years, how much did your technology advance? How much did your culture change? Dr. Sektar considered this. The honest answer was that Zalani civilization had remained essentially unchanged for centuries. They had achieved perfection and maintained it. "You're suggesting that challenges are necessary for growth," she said finally. "I'm suggesting that your people are rediscovering something they forgot," Marcus replied. "The ability to grow." Across the city, Commander James Torres was having similar conversations with Zalani security personnel. The alien equivalent of police and emergency responders had requested human training in crisis management, but they were struggling with human methods. "Commander Torres," said Security Chief Corval, "your people make decisions with insufficient data. How do you function without complete information?" James was leading a training exercise where Zalani security teams had to respond to simulated emergencies. The aliens kept requesting more details about each scenario before taking action. "In a real emergency, you never have complete information," James explained. "You assess what you know, make the best decision you can, and adapt as you learn more. But what if the decision is wrong? Then you make a new decision. The important thing is to act quickly enough to help people." This concept horrified the Zalani trainees. Their traditional approach involved extensive planning, risk assessment, and committee approval before taking any action. James was asking, them to make instant decisions based on incomplete data. But during the exercises, the Zilani who followed James's advice consistently outperformed those who stuck to traditional methods. When faced with simulated disasters, the human-trained teams saved more lives and resolved crises faster. Word of these changes reached the Galactic Confederation headquarters, where representatives from dozens of species monitored the situation on Zilani worlds with growing alarm. "The humans are contaminating Zilani culture," declared Ambassador Thys of the Corvani Empire. "Their reckless approach to life is spreading like a disease." "The Zilani plague has been contained," responded Confederation Medical Director Halon. "Human methods saved an entire civilization." "At what cost?" Thys demanded. "Reports indicate that young Zilani are abandoning safety protocols, taking physical risks, and questioning established authority. This is not medical treatment, it's cultural invasion." The debate divided the Confederation. Some species saw human influence as a positive force that was helping the Zilani become stronger and more adaptable. Others viewed it as a dangerous contamination that threatened the stability of galactic civilization. On Zilani Prime, Captain Sarah Chen was beginning to understand the scope of what was happening. The medical mission had become something much larger and more complex. "Ambassador Kethva," Sarah said during one of their regular meetings, "I need to ask you directly. Do you want us to leave?" Kethva considered the question carefully. Around them, the medical center buzzed with activity that would have been impossible months earlier. Zilani and human staff worked together, shared meals from the same kitchens, and seemed comfortable, with a level of chaos that would have paralyzed traditional Zilani operations. "Captain Chen, my people are changing in ways that concern our leadership, but they're also becoming stronger, more creative, and more resilient than we've been in centuries." "That doesn't answer my question." "Then let me be direct," Kethva said. "Before your arrival, we were a dying civilization, not just from the plague, but from our own stagnation. We had achieved perfection and stopped growing. Your people didn't just bring us medicine. You brought us the concept of productive struggle." Sarah frowned. "Productive struggle? The idea that facing challenges, accepting some level of risk, and learning from failure can make us stronger instead of just threatening our safety." In the weeks that followed, the changes in Zilani society became more pronounced. Young Zilani began forming social groups based on shared interests rather than just professional duties. They started recreational activities that involved physical exertion and mild risks, concepts that had been alien to their culture for centuries. Some Zilani began what they called human-style eating, consuming foods that hadn't been completely sterilized. Others took up adventure walking, exploring parts of their cities without predetermined routes or safety protocols. The older generation watched these developments with a mixture of pride and terror. Their young people were becoming more confident and capable, but they were also abandoning traditions that had maintained peace and safety for 1,000 years. Dr. Webb received regular reports of what human psychologists would recognize as post-traumatic growth. Zilani, who had survived the plague and worked closely with humans, showed increased resilience, better problem-solving skills, and improved ability to handle stress. "They're not just immune to the plague now," Marcus reported to Sarah. "They're developing psychological immunity to the kind of stagnation that made them vulnerable in the first place." But the most significant change came when a group of young Zilani requested something unprecedented in their civilization's recent history. They wanted to travel to other worlds, including Earth, to study human society firsthand. "For 800 years, Zilani have been content to remain on our home worlds," Ambassador Kethva explained to the Confederation Council via holographic communication. "Now, our youth want to explore, to experience uncertainty, to grow through challenge rather than despite it." The request sent shockwaves through the galactic community. The peaceful, predictable Zilani were becoming explorers and risk-takers. Some species saw this as evolution, others saw it as the end of the galactic order they had known for millennia. As reports reached Earth about the changes in Zilani society, human leaders began to realize that their first contact with alien life had accomplished something unprecedented. They had accidentally taught an entire civilization how to be human. The question now was whether the galaxy was ready for more than one species that thrived on chaos, adapted through struggle, and grew stronger by facing their fears instead of avoiding them. 6 months after the plague had been declared officially contained, Dr. Marcus Webb made a discovery that changed everything humanity thought they knew about alien biology. He was conducting routine health screenings on Zilani, who had worked closely with human medical teams when the test results made him double-check his equipment. "Captain Chen, you need to see this," Marcus called Sarah to his laboratory, his voice tight with excitement and concern. Sarah arrived to find Marcus staring at biological scans that meant nothing to her untrained eye. "What am I looking at?" "Zilani." "Immune systems," Marcus replied. "But not like any we've seen before. The Zilani who worked with us for extended periods aren't just immune to the plague anymore. They're developing resistance to diseases that would have required advanced medical intervention just 6 months ago." Sarah studied the data more carefully. "Are you saying they're evolving?" "Faster than should be possible. Their immune systems are adapting in real time, learning from exposure to human biology and environmental factors. It's like they're making up for 1,000 years of sterile living in just a few months." The implications were staggering. The Zilani weren't just recovering from the plague, they were becoming a fundamentally different species. Ambassador Kethva listened to Marcus's report with a mixture of fascination and worry. Around them in the medical center, the changes were visible to anyone who looked closely. The Zilani staff moved with more confidence, worked longer hours without fatigue, and handled stress in ways that would have been impossible for their species just months earlier. "Dr. Webb," Kethva said carefully, "are these changes permanent?" "As far as we can tell, yes, and they seem to be generational. Young Zilani are adapting faster than adults, and any children born to adapted parents show even stronger resilience. Markers." The conversation was interrupted by Security Chief Corval, who had been transformed by his work with Commander Torres. The once cautious official now moved with purposeful energy that reminded Sarah of human military officers. "Ambassador, we have a situation," Corval reported. 3 more species have requested human medical assistance. The Vorthak are facing a bacterial infection that their technology cannot stop. The Nexari have a genetic disorder that's spreading through their population. And the Mendel Collective is dealing with what they describe as biological warfare from unknown sources. Kethva's mirror eyes reflected surprise. 3 species in 1 day? Word has spread through the Confederation about human medical capabilities, Corval explained. Other civilizations want what we received, the ability to fight diseases that their advanced medicine cannot handle. Sarah felt a familiar weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. "Ambassador, we're not ready to treat multiple species simultaneously. We barely understand how our methods affected your people. But you cannot refuse to help," Kethva said firmly. "Not when you have the ability to save lives." The statement surprised Sarah with its directness. 6 months earlier, the diplomatic Zilani would have approached such a request with careful protocols and extensive planning. Now Kethva spoke with the kind of decisive confidence Sarah associated with human leaders. "You've changed too," Sarah observed. Kethva nodded without embarrassment. "Extended contact with your species has affected all of us. We think differently, act more quickly, and accept uncertainty as a normal part of existence. Some of our people find this disturbing. I find it liberating." The next week brought delegations from all 3 requesting species to Zilani Prime. Sarah watched the aliens' reactions to the transformed Zilani with growing understanding of what humanity had accidentally accomplished. The Vorthak delegation, a species of insectoid beings who valued efficiency above all else, were shocked by The apparent chaos of the human Zalani medical facilities. Patients moved freely through areas that should have been sterile. Staff made decisions without consulting supervisors. Everyone seemed to be improvising. "This is not proper medical procedure," declared Chief Physician Skrikstal as she watched Dr. Webb and Dr. Sektar collaborate on a new treatment protocol. "Where are your safety guidelines? Your approval processes?" "We're writing them as we go," Dr. Sektar replied, a response that would have been impossible for a traditional Zalani to give. Human medicine teaches us that rigid protocols can prevent adaptation to new challenges. The Nexari representative, Ambassador Qual of a species known for their philosophical approach to problems, was more interested in the psychological changes. They observed. "Your people have developed what humans call risk tolerance," Qual noted to Kethva. "But this conflicts with the Zalani reputation for careful consideration of all outcomes. We learned that some outcomes cannot be calculated in advance," Kethva replied. "Sometimes you must act first and understand the consequences later." The Mendel Collective, a hive mind species that made decisions through consensus among millions of individuals, found the human approach almost incomprehensible. Their representative, a being called Unit Prime 7, spent hours observing human medical teams making split-second decisions without consulting anyone. "How do individual humans choose correct actions without group input?" Unit Prime 7 asked. "Commander Torres, during a demonstration of emergency response procedures. We use our best judgment based on training and experience," James replied. "Sometimes we're wrong, but waiting for perfect information usually means people die while you're thinking. But incorrect decisions cause harm. So does not making decisions. The difference is that we can fix mistakes, but we can't help people who die while we're trying to avoid making mistakes." This philosophy challenged the fundamental worldview of species that had built their civilizations on avoiding risk and minimizing uncertainty. Yet they couldn't argue with the results. Human methods worked where their advanced technologies had failed. Dr. Webb began working with medical teams from all three species, but the treatment process revealed something unexpected. The controlled infections that produced life-saving antibodies in humans had different effects on different alien biologies. The Vorthak, with their insectoid physiology, developed immune responses that were almost too aggressive. Their bodies attacked infections so vigorously that they risked damaging healthy tissue. The Nexari, being naturally long-lived and slow to change, took months to develop any measurable immune response. The Mendel Collective's hive mind biology meant that immunity developed by one individual was somehow shared across their entire network. "We're not just treating diseases," Marcus reported to Sarah after weeks of cross-species medical work. "We're accidentally creating new forms of evolution in every species we help." The realization came with a disturbing corollary. Every species that received human medical treatment began showing the same behavioral changes they had observed in the Zalani: increased risk tolerance, faster decision-making, greater adaptability to changing circumstances. Ambassador Theiss of the Corvani Empire arrived at Zalani Prime with a fleet of ships and a list of demands. "The human contamination must be contained," Theiss declared at an emergency meeting of all species representatives. "4 civilizations have now been altered by human contact. This threatens the stability of the entire galactic order." The stability that allowed a simple plague to nearly destroy the Zalani? Kethva challenged. The order that left 4 species helpless against diseases that humans consider minor annoyances? The confrontation marked a clear division in galactic politics. Progressive species saw human influence as evolution, the development of necessary survival traits that advanced civilizations had lost through centuries of comfortable safety. Conservative species saw it as contamination that would destroy the predictable peace the galaxy had maintained for millennia. "You don't understand what you've done," Theiss said to Sarah. "For 2,000 years, galactic civilization has been stable because we eliminated the chaos and unpredictability that characterizes primitive species. You've reintroduced the very traits we evolved beyond. Maybe you evolved too far, Sarah replied. When facing new challenges became impossible because you eliminated all the skills needed to handle uncertainty. The debate was interrupted by an urgent communication from the Confederation's long-range monitoring stations. Scanner arrays at the galaxy's edge had detected something that made every species representative in the room forget their political disagreements. Unknown vessels approaching from extragalactic space, the monitoring station reported. Energy signatures unlike anything in our databases. They appear to have overwhelmed 3 outer system colonies without resistance. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. An unknown threat from beyond their galaxy had arrived, and the advanced civilizations that had maintained peace for centuries were about to face their greatest test. How did they defeat 3 colonies so quickly? Ambassador Quall asked. Unknown, came the reply. The colonies followed standard defensive protocols. None of their established procedures were effective. Sarah looked around the room at representatives of species that had spent centuries perfecting their responses to known challenges. Now they faced something completely unknown, and their perfected systems had already failed. Ambassador Thiss, Sarah said quietly, I think you're about to discover. The emergency session of the Galactic Confederation Council convened within hours of the first reports from the outer colonies. Representatives from 57 species gathered via holographic link as more disturbing news arrived every few minutes. 7. Colonies have now gone silent, reported Admiral Zenth of the Confederation Defense Force. The unknown attackers seem to overwhelm defensive systems before colonies can even send distress signals. Captain Sarah Chen watched the alien officials struggle with a crisis that exceeded all their established protocols. For 2,000 years, galactic conflicts had been resolved through diplomacy, economic pressure, or carefully planned military actions against known opponents using familiar technology. No one had prepared for an enemy that operated completely outside their understanding. What do we know about their technology? Asked Chancellor Vex of the Altarian Republic. Very little. Admiral Zenth admitted. The energy signatures don't match any known power source. Their ships appear to use some form of adaptive shielding that neutralizes our standard weapons on contact. Most concerning, they seem to learn from each encounter, becoming more effective against our defenses with every engagement. Ambassador Theiss of the Corvani Empire, who had arrived demanding human containment, now looked distinctly uncomfortable. Have we attempted standard diplomatic protocols? Multiple hail attempts across all communication frequencies. No response. They appear uninterested in negotiation. Sarah exchanged glances with Dr. Webb and Commander Torres. The situation sounded familiar to anyone who had studied Earth's military history. An adaptive enemy that learned quickly and ignored conventional approaches. Admiral, Sarah said, drawing attention from the assembled aliens. How are you currently responding to these attacks? Admiral Zenth seemed surprised by the question. Standard defensive protocols. We've reinforced colony shields, positioned patrol fleets at strategic points, and activated early warning systems. All predictable responses, James Torres observed. Quietly. What did you say? Theiss demanded. James spoke louder. I said your responses are predictable. If this enemy learns from encounters, using the same tactics repeatedly just teaches them how to beat you more efficiently. Then what do you suggest, human? Admiral Zenth asked with barely concealed irritation. Unpredictability, Sarah replied. Random patrol patterns, varied defensive strategies, asymmetric responses that don't follow standard military doctrine. The suggestion horrified most of the alien representatives. Their military traditions emphasized coordination, planning, and proven strategies refined over centuries. Chaos is not a battle plan, declared General Tok of the Braxian military caste. It is when you're fighting an enemy that adapts to order, James replied. The debate was interrupted by Ambassador Kethva, whose transformation over the past months had prepared her for exactly this kind of crisis. The humans have a point, she said, surprising many in the council. Our defensive strategies assume rational opponents who follow recognizable patterns. But what if these attackers don't think like us? The Zilani have been contaminated by human influence, Thys said dismissively. Your judgment is compromised. My judgment is enhanced, Kethava replied firmly. 6 months ago, my people faced extinction because our perfect medical systems couldn't adapt to a new threat. We survived because the humans taught us that sometimes the best response to the unknown is controlled improvisation. Reports continued arriving throughout the debate. The unknown attackers had destroyed 12 colonies and were moving deeper into Confederation space. More troubling, they seemed to be learning not just from individual encounters, but from all engagements collectively, as if sharing information instantly across their entire force. It's like fighting a hive mind that evolves in real time, Dr. Webb observed after reviewing the tactical reports. Every defense you use successfully once becomes useless in the next battle. Then how do we fight them? Asked Ambassador Quall of the Nexari. The same way humans have always fought superior enemies, Sarah replied. We adapt faster than they do. The room fell silent as the aliens processed this concept. Most galactic species had militaries designed to execute predetermined strategies with precision. The idea of deliberately embracing chaos and uncertainty violated everything they understood about effective defense. Captain Chen, Admiral Zenth said carefully, are you suggesting that human military doctrine might be effective against this threat? I'm suggesting that human military doctrine is designed for exactly this kind of threat. We've been fighting adaptive, unpredictable enemies for our entire history. Every war we've ever won was against opponents who had some advantage. We had to overcome through creativity and flexibility. Chancellor Vex leaned forward in his holographic projection. You're proposing that the galaxy's most advanced military forces adopt the strategies of a primitive species? I'm proposing that advanced doesn't always mean better, Sarah replied. Sometimes it just means more specialized, and specialization is vulnerability when you face something completely new. The argument might have continued indefinitely, but the crisis escalated beyond debate. Long-range sensors detected a massive fleet of unknown vessels moving toward the core systems. The attackers weren't just raiding colonies anymore. They were mounting a full invasion. Estimated time to reach the inner worlds? Admiral Zenth asked. 72 hours at current speed. The Confederation faced a decision that would determine the survival of galactic civilization. They could continue relying on their established military doctrines and likely face defeat by an enemy that had already proven capable of overcoming their best defenses, or they could embrace the chaotic, unpredictable approach advocated by the species they had considered primitive. I propose a compromise, Ambassador Kethva said into the tense silence. We organize our defense into 2 forces. The primary fleet follows traditional Confederation tactics. A secondary force operates under human guidance, using unconventional methods. And if the human approach fails, Thys demanded, then we're no worse off than we would be following only traditional strategies that have already failed 12 times, Kethva replied. The vote was close, but desperation won over tradition. The Confederation authorized the formation of an experimental defense force under joint human-alien command. Within 24 hours, Sarah found herself aboard a mixed fleet of ships from 6 different species, including several crewed by human-adapted aliens who had developed the psychological flexibility needed for unconventional warfare. Commander Torres worked with alien security chiefs to develop tactics that emphasized surprise over strength, speed over firepower, and creativity over doctrine. Dr. Webb contributed by analyzing the biological and technological patterns shown by the invaders, looking for weaknesses that traditional military analysis had missed. The key is to avoid giving them consistent data, James explained to a mixed group of human and alien officers. Every engagement has to be different. Different weapons, different formations, different objectives. make them adapt to chaos instead of order. The first test came when the experimental fleet encountered an advanced scout group from the invading force. Instead of engaging in a traditional battle formation, the mixed fleet scattered into seemingly random patterns, attacked from unexpected angles, and used weapons in combinations that defied military logic. The results were encouraging. The invader ships, which had easily overwhelmed conventional defenses, struggled against tactics that followed no recognizable pattern. Several enemy vessels were destroyed before they could adapt to the chaotic assault. "It's working," reported Captain Velnox of the Braxian warship Stormcutter. "The enemy shields that neutralized our main batteries couldn't adapt to 3 different weapon types, fired simultaneously from unpredictable angles. But success came with a cost. The alien. Crews struggled with the psychological pressure of abandoning their training. Species that had relied on careful coordination for centuries found themselves making split-second decisions without orders from command. Some thrived under the pressure. Others, particularly those who had worked closely with humans during the medical crisis, adapted quickly to the new requirements. But many alien crew members suffered stress reactions as their ordered worldview collided with the demands of chaotic warfare. "We're asking them to become human," Dr. Webb observed, as he treated alien personnel for conditions their species had never experienced: combat stress, decision fatigue, and adaptation anxiety. "We're asking them to survive," Sarah replied grimly. The main battle came when both fleets met the invading force at the edge of the core systems. The traditional Confederation fleet engaged first, following established military doctrine with precision and coordination. For the first hour, their advanced tactics and superior technology seemed to be winning. Then, the invaders adapted. Shield. Frequencies shifted to neutralize Confederation weapons. Attack patterns evolved to counter standard defensive formations. Within 2 hours, the traditional fleet was retreating with heavy casualties. The experimental fleet attacked while the invaders were still adapting to conventional tactics. Using strategies that changed every few minutes, weapon combinations that made no logical sense, and formations that... The stars had never looked so cold. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of Earth's orbital defense station, watching the enemy fleet approach. 50,000 alien ships moved through space like a swarm of angry insects. Each ship was bigger than anything humanity had ever built. Each one carried enough firepower to destroy a city. "How long until they reach Earth?" Chen asked. 12 hours, Admiral," her communications officer replied. His voice shook slightly. "Maybe less if they speed up." Chen nodded. She had expected this day for years, but it still felt like a punch to the gut. The Hegemony Council had finally decided humanity was too much trouble to ignore. For 300 years, humans had spread across the galaxy. They built colonies on dead worlds and made them green. They mined asteroids and turned empty space into bustling trade routes. They were loud, messy, and refused to follow anyone else's rules. The hegemony didn't like that. 12 alien species controlled most of the galaxy. They called themselves the Hegemony Council, and they had been in charge for thousands of years. Their technology was advanced, their fleets were massive, their laws were absolute, or so they thought. "Admiral Zexathara is requesting a communication channel," the officer said. Chen straightened her uniform. "Put her through." The main screen flickered, and an alien face appeared. Admiral Zexathara looked like a cross between a lizard and a bird. Her scales were dark blue and her eyes were the color of old gold. She had led hegemony fleets for over a century. Entire worlds surrendered just hearing her name. "Human Admiral," Zexathara said. Her voice was smooth but cold. "I am here to deliver the final judgment of the Hegemony Council." "I'm listening," Chen replied. "Your species has violated 17 major galactic laws. You have colonized restricted systems. You have interfered with hegemony trade routes. You have refused to submit to proper authority." Zexathara's eyes narrowed. The Council has decided that humanity must be corrected. Chen felt her jaw tighten. And what does that mean, exactly? Complete surrender. Your military forces will be disbanded. Your colonies will be placed under hegemony control. Your homeworld will accept a permanent occupation force. Zexathara smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. In return, we will allow your species to continue existing. That's generous. Of you, Chen said dryly. You have 6 hours to respond. If you refuse, we will take what we want by force. The alien admiral leaned forward. I should mention that resistance is pointless. My fleet could destroy your entire solar system without breaking formation. The screen went dark. Chen stood, in silence for a moment. Around her, the bridge crew waited. Some looked scared. Others looked angry. All of them looked to her for answers. Get me a secure channel to Europa base, she said finally. Admiral? Her communications officer asked. Europa base has been dark for 20 years. Not anymore, Chen replied. Use authorization code Prometheus 77 Alpha. The officer's eyes widened. Every military officer knew that code, even if they had never used it. It was the key to humanity's deepest, darkest secret. The screen flickered again. This time, it showed a man in his 50s with graying hair and tired eyes. Dr. Marcus Webb looked like he hadn't slept in days. Sarah, Webb said. I was wondering when you'd call. Marcus, tell me it's ready. Webb rubbed his face. Define ready. It won't blow up the solar system, if that's what you're asking. Probably. That's not exactly reassuring. Sarah, you know what this thing is. You know what it can do. Are you sure about this? Chen looked out at the approaching fleet. 50,000 ships, enough firepower to crack planets, all coming to enslave or destroy her species. They gave us 6 hours to surrender, she said. Webb nodded slowly. Then we don't have much choice, do we? I'll begin the activation sequence. How long? 4 hours to full power, maybe less if we skip some safety checks. Skip them all. Sarah, skip them all, Marcus. If this doesn't work, safety checks won't matter anyway. Webb sighed. Understood. Prometheus is coming online. The screen went dark again. Chen turned to face her crew. All ships, prepare for evacuation protocols. I want every civilian transport ready to jump to the outer colonies. Military vessels will form a defensive line around Earth. Admiral, her tactical officer said. With respect, our entire fleet won't last 5 minutes against that force. They're not supposed to last 5 minutes, Chen replied. They just need to buy us time. Meanwhile, deep beneath the ice of Europa, something ancient began to wake up. The Prometheus facility had been built in absolute secrecy 40 years ago. Only a dozen people knew it existed. Even fewer understood what it really was. Dr. Webb walked through corridors that had been empty for 2 decades. Emergency lighting cast strange shadows on the walls. His footsteps echoed in the silence. He reached the main control room and began flipping switches. One by one, massive systems came online. Power readings climbed from 0 to numbers that should have been impossible. Computer status report, Webb said. Prometheus Unbound is at 15% power, a calm voice replied. All primary systems are functional. Reality distortion field is stable. Webb smiled grimly. Reality distortion field. They had spent 20 years trying to come up with a better name for it. They never did. The Prometheus Unbound wasn't just a ship. It was humanity's answer to a simple question. What if the laws of physics were more like suggestions? Other species had built bigger guns and stronger shields. Humans had decided to build something that could ignore the rules entirely. Begin emergent sequence, Webb commanded. Emergent sequence initiated. Estimated time to surface, 3 hours, 47 minutes. Deep in Europa's ice, the largest structure humanity had ever built, began to move. The Prometheus Unbound was 2.5 kilometers long and shaped like nothing that should be able to fly. Its hull was made of materials that didn't technically exist and powered by reactions that broke several fundamental laws. As it rose through the ice, space itself seemed to bend around it. Back on Earth's defense station, alarms began sounding. "Admiral!" the sensor officer called out. "I'm reading massive energy signatures from Europa. Whatever's down there, it's big." Chen smiled for the first time in hours. "That, Lieutenant, is humanity's insurance policy." "Ma'am, you'll see. All ships maintain defensive positions and send a message to Admiral Zexathara." "What should it say?" Chen's smile grew wider. "Tell her she might want to reconsider her offer." The hegemony fleet continued its approach, confident in their overwhelming superiority. They had no idea that humanity had been preparing for this moment for decades. Soon they would learn that humans were very good at breaking things, including the universe itself. Admiral Zexathara stood in the command center of her flagship, the Eternal Dominion. Around her, dozens of officers from different species worked at their stations. The bridge hummed with quiet efficiency that came from centuries of conquest. "Report," she commanded. "All fleet elements are in position," her tactical officer replied. He was a Krell, tall and thin with 4 arms and skin like polished metal. "The human defense fleet has taken position around their homeworld. 47 ships total." Zexathara laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. 47 ships against 50,000. Either they're incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. "Perhaps both, Admiral," another officer suggested. "Signal all ships. Begin the attack in 4 hours. I want this over quickly." Zexathara turned to her communications officer. "Any response from the humans?" "Yes, Admiral. They said you might want to reconsider your offer." Zexathara's golden eyes narrowed. "How amusing. They think they have something that can threaten us." She had good reason to be confident. Her fleet represented the combined military might of 12 advanced civilizations. Some of her ships were older than human civilization itself. Others carried weapons that could burn the atmosphere off a planet. Humanity had been spacefaring for only 3 centuries. They were children playing with toys, or so she thought. Deep beneath Europa's ice, the Prometheus Unbound finally broke free. Dr. Webb watched from the control room as his life's work emerged into open space. Even after 20 years of building, the ship still took his breath away. It looked wrong. That was the only way to describe it. The hull curved in directions that hurt to look at. Parts of the ship seemed to exist in different places at the same time. The engines glowed with a light that wasn't quite any color that should exist. "All systems green," the computer announced. "Reality distortion field at maximum stability. Captain Chen is requesting permission to board." "Permission granted," Webb replied. A small shuttle approached the Prometheus Unbound. As it got closer, the shuttle began to stretch and bend. Not physically, but in ways that made Webb's instruments scream warnings. The shuttle existed normally one moment, then seemed to be in 3 places at once the next. This was how the ship worked. It didn't move through space like normal vessels. It convinced space to move around it instead. Captain Sarah Chen had left her post on the defense station to take command of humanity's most powerful weapon. She had trained for this moment for 15 years, studying physics that most scientists said was impossible. As her shuttle docked with the Prometheus Unbound, she felt reality shift around her. The walls of the ship seemed to breathe. Gravity pointed in directions that didn't make sense. Walking down the corridors required her to think about where she wanted to go rather than just moving her feet. The bridge was the strangest part of all. It existed in normal space mostly, but the view screens showed things that shouldn't be possible. Stars appeared as spirals of color. Empty space writhed with patterns of light and shadow. "Welcome aboard, Captain," said Commander James Park, her second in command. He looked pale but determined. All stations, report ready. Thank you, Commander. Navigation, plot a course for the hegemony fleet. Captain, the navigation officer said. How exactly do we plot a course for this thing? Chen smiled. Think of where you want to go. The ship will handle the rest. Meanwhile, Zexathara was receiving her first reports about the strange readings from Europa. Admiral, her science officer said, I'm reading impossible energy signatures from the human moon. The readings don't match any known technology. Explain. Impossible, Zexathara demanded. The science officer, a member of the ethereal race known for their advanced understanding of physics, looked confused. The energy signatures are negative in some dimensions, while being positive in others. The B, mass readings fluctuate between 0 and infinity. Either our instruments are completely broken, or the humans have built something that violates the fundamental laws of physics. Check the instruments. I've checked them 17 times, Admiral. They're working perfectly. Zexathara frowned. The ethereals were never wrong about physics. If one of them said something was impossible, it usually was. Show me, she commanded. The main screen displayed sensor readings from Europa. What Zexathara saw made no sense. The readings showed a massive object that seemed to exist in multiple locations simultaneously. Its energy output was both enormous and negligible. Its mass was both crushing and weightless. What am I looking at? She asked. Unknown, Admiral. But whatever it is, it's moving toward us. That was when the Prometheus Unbound appeared on their screens. Every officer on the bridge fell silent. The human ship looked like it had been designed by someone who hated the concept of three-dimensional space. It was huge, but also seemed small. It was moving fast, but also appeared to be standing still. How long until it reaches us? Zexathara asked. That's difficult to calculate, Admiral. According to our sensors, it's already here, but also still at Europa, and somehow also hasn't left dock yet. Zexathara felt something she hadn't experienced in decades. Uncertainty. All ships. Battle stations, target that vessel. Admiral, her tactical officer said, targeting systems can't lock on. The computer can't decide where the ship actually is. On the Prometheus Unbound, Captain Chen watched the hegemony fleet prepare for battle. The enemy ships looked impressive on her screens, but she knew they were thinking in terms of normal space combat. This wouldn't be normal space combat. Captain, her communications officer said, the hegemony flagship is hailing us. Put them through. Zexathara's face appeared on the screen. She looked angry and confused in equal measure. Human vessel, she said. Identify yourself and state your intentions. This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Terran vessel Prometheus Unbound. We're here to discuss your withdrawal from human space. You're in no position to make demands. My fleet outnumbers you 50,000 to 1. Chen leaned back in her captain's chair. Around her, space itself seemed to pulse with barely contained energy. Admiral, you're thinking about this all wrong. You're not outnumbered 50,000 to 1. You're outnumbered 1 to 50,000. That makes no sense. It will in a moment. This is your final warning. Withdraw from human space, or we will demonstrate why we built this ship. Zexathara laughed. One ship against my entire fleet? You humans really are insane. Maybe, Chen replied. But we're also very good at solving problems. And right now, your fleet is our problem. She cut the communication. Around the Prometheus Unbound, space began to ripple like water. The laws of physics, which had remained constant for billions of years, suddenly became negotiable. The hegemony fleet was about to learn that humanity had weaponized the universe itself. All stations, Chen announced, prepare for combat. And remember, we're not just fighting ships. We're fighting the assumption that the universe has to make sense. The greatest space battle in galactic history was about to begin, and it would break everything. Admiral Zexathara had conquered 47 worlds in her career. She had seen weapons that could burn through the cores of planets. She had witnessed fleets destroy entire star systems. Nothing in the galaxy surprised her anymore. Until now. "Admiral," her science officer said, his voice tight with fear. "The space around the human vessel is behaving strangely. Gravity is fluctuating in patterns that shouldn't be possible. The speed of light appears to be changing in localized areas." "That's impossible," Zexathera replied, but her voice lacked its usual confidence. "Yes, Admiral, it should be impossible, but it's happening anyway." On her main screen, the human ship continued to defy everything she understood about reality. The Prometheus Unbound seemed to exist in several places at once, its image flickering between different positions like a bad hologram. "All ships," she commanded, "open fire! Target the human vessel!" 50,000 ships responded at once. The combined firepower could have shattered moons and boiled oceans. Plasma beams hot enough to melt steel lanced through space. Antimatter missiles that could crack continents streaked toward their target. Graviton bombs that bent space itself flew alongside weapons that had no names in any human language. It was enough destruction to end civilizations. All of it stopped, 3 kilometers from the Prometheus Unbound. The weapons didn't bounce off shields or get absorbed by armor. They simply stopped, hanging in space like insects trapped in amber. Plasma beams froze mid-flight. Missiles drifted motionless. Even the gravity bombs hung there, their reality-warping effects contained in bubbles of twisted space-time. "What just happened?" Zexathera demanded. "Unknown, Admiral. All weapons have ceased forward motion at exactly 3 kilometers from the target. They appear to be suspended in some kind of spatial distortion field." Zexathera stared at the screen. In 300 years of warfare, she had never seen anything like this. The humans hadn't destroyed the incoming weapons or deflected them. They had simply made the space around their ship refuse to let the weapons continue. On the Prometheus Unbound, Captain Chen watched the frozen attack with grim satisfaction. "Impressive," she said. "How many ships just fired at us?" "All of them, Captain," her tactical officer replied. "Approximately 3 million individual weapons. And they're all just stopped?" "The reality distortion field is holding them in stasis. They exist in normal space, but time moves differently there. From their perspective, they're still traveling toward us at full speed. From our perspective, they're not moving at all." Chen nodded. She had studied the theory for years, but seeing it in practice was still amazing. The Prometheus Unbound didn't just bend the laws of physics. It convinced reality that the laws were more like guidelines. "Captain," her communications officer said, "Admiral Zexathera is hailing us again." "Put her through." The alien admiral's face appeared on screen. Her golden eyes were wide with something that might have been fear. "What have you done?" Zexathera demanded. "We stopped your attack," Chen replied calmly. "Your weapons are perfectly safe. They're just taking a very long time to reach us." "This is impossible. No species has technology that can manipulate space-time on this scale." "You're right. No species does. But humans aren't like other species. We don't accept that things are impossible. We just figure out how to make them possible anyway." Chen stood up from her captain's chair. Around her, the bridge hummed with power that made reality itself uncomfortable. "Admiral Zexathera, you came here to force humanity to submit. You brought 50,000 ships because you thought overwhelming force would make us surrender. But you made one critical mistake." "What? Mistake? You assumed we would fight fair." Chen cut the communication and turned to her weapons officer. "Target the center of their fleet formation. Prepare the Titan cannon." Every officer on the bridge went quiet. They had trained for this moment, but actually using the Titan cannon was something else entirely. "Captain," the weapons officer said carefully, "are you sure about this? Once we fire, there's no going back." "They had their chance to leave peacefully," Chen replied. "Fire the Titan cannon." Deep in the heart of the Prometheus Unbound, machinery that shouldn't exist began to power up. The Titan cannon wasn't a weapon in any traditional sense. It didn't fire energy beams or projectiles. Instead, It fired concentrated space-time itself. Reality screamed. The beam that emerged from the Prometheus Unbound was invisible to the naked eye, but every sensor in the fleet detected it. It wasn't made of matter or energy. It was made of the fundamental structure of the universe, compressed into a weapon that could rewrite the laws of physics wherever it touched. The beam passed through the center of the hegemony fleet, and everything changed. Ships didn't explode. They didn't burn or break apart. They simply stopped being ships in any meaningful sense. Some vessels found themselves scattered across multiple dimensions simultaneously. Their crews existed in normal space, while their hulls existed in hyperspace, and their engines existed in a dimension where time moved backward. Other ships discovered that the constants of physics no longer applied to them. The speed of light became the speed of sound. Gravity worked sideways. The strong nuclear force decided it didn't want to hold atoms together anymore. A few unlucky vessels found themselves experiencing time in reverse. For several terrifying seconds, their crews watched their own deaths happen backward before the ships winked out of existence entirely. In the space of a single moment, 15,000 hegemony ships ceased to exist in any conventional sense. They weren't destroyed. They were edited out of reality like mistakes in a cosmic manuscript. The surviving ships fled in panic, their crews screaming reports that made no sense. Some tried to jump to hyperspace, only to discover that the fundamental framework of faster-than-light travel had become unstable. Ships that attempted to jump found themselves emerging light years away from their intended destinations, or decades in the past, or in universes where the laws of physics were completely different. On the Eternal Dominion, Admiral Zexathara watched, in horror as her mighty fleet fell apart around her. "Damage report!" she shouted. "Admiral," her tactical officer said, his voice shaking, "we've lost 15,000 ships. Not destroyed, lost, they're just gone. Our sensors can't find any trace of them." "What about the rest of the fleet?" "Scattered across the system. Many ships are reporting that their faster-than-light drives are malfunctioning. Some are experiencing temporal displacement. Others are registering impossible physics readings." Zexathara sank into her command chair. In a single shot, the humans had done more damage to her fleet than entire wars had managed. But worse than the losses was the implication. If humanity could do this once, they could do it again. "Admiral," her communications officer said quietly, "the human ship is hailing us." Captain Chen's face appeared on the screen. She looked calm, as if she hadn't just rewritten the fundamental laws of reality. "Admiral Zexathara," Chen said, "I believe we were discussing your withdrawal from human space." "What have you done?" Zexathara whispered. "We defended ourselves. Your fleet attacked us, so we responded appropriately." "You've broken the laws of physics." "No," Chen replied with a slight smile. "We've just demonstrated that the laws of physics are more flexible than you thought. Now, are you ready to discuss terms, or would you like us to demonstrate our capabilities again?" Zexathara looked at her remaining ships, scattered and broken across the solar system. Many were already fleeing toward the edge of the system, there, crews too terrified to follow orders. For the first time in her long career, Admiral Zexathara found herself in a battle she could not win. The humans had done the impossible. They had weaponized reality itself. The silence that followed the Titan cannon's firing was the most terrifying sound Admiral Zexathara had ever heard. Across her fleet, emergency beacons screamed warnings that made no sense. Ships reported that their navigation computers couldn't determine which direction was up. Others said their engines were working perfectly, but somehow moving them backward through time. A few vessels claimed they were receiving messages from themselves in alternate dimensions. "Status report," Zexathara demanded, though part of her didn't want to know the answer. Her science officer, one of the most brilliant minds in the ethereal race, looked up from his instruments with eyes full of terror. "Admiral," he said slowly, "we have a problem, A very big problem. Explain. The human weapon didn't just destroy our ships. It damaged space-time itself. The area where our vessels were destroyed has become what I can only describe as a reality wound. The fundamental constants of physics are fluctuating randomly within a sphere roughly 1 light hour across. Zexathara felt cold despite the warmth of her bridge. What does that mean for our ships? Any vessel that enters that area experiences unpredictable changes to the laws of physics. Some ships have reported that the speed of light is now variable. Others say gravity is working in reverse. 3 vessels claim they've started receiving radio signals from the future. On the bridge of the Titan's Wrath, Captain Kextar of the Hegemony's 47th Battle Group was learning firsthand what unpredictable physics meant. "Engineering!" he shouted. "Why are we moving backward?" "Unknown, sir," came the reply. "Our engines are running at full forward thrust, but something is pulling us in reverse. Also, sir, the reactor is running at 150% efficiency, which should be impossible. And why is the artificial gravity pointing toward the ceiling? We're working on that, sir." Kextar gripped his command chair as his ship tumbled through space in directions that didn't exist 5 minutes ago. Through his viewports, he could see other vessels spinning helplessly as their crews tried to understand why left had become purple and forward had become yesterday. "Sir," his communications officer called out, "we're receiving a message from the human vessel." "Put it through." Captain Chen's image appeared on the screen. She looked concerned, which was somehow more frightening than if she had looked angry. "Captain Kextar," she said, "we're reading massive instabilities in your ship's local space-time. We're prepared to offer assistance." "Assistance?" Kextar laughed bitterly. "You did this to us." "We defended ourselves against an unprovoked attack," Chen replied calmly. "But we're not interested in watching your crews suffer because of your admiral's poor decisions. Would you like help stabilizing your ship's physics?" Kexatar wanted to refuse, but at that moment his ship's gravity shifted again, and several officers floated toward what used to be a wall. "What kind of help?" he asked. "We can emit a localized reality stabilization field. It will restore normal physics to your immediate area. But you'll need to move away from the disruption zone immediately." Afterward, Kextar looked around his bridge. Half his crew was stuck to the ceiling. His tactical officer was phasing in and out of existence. His navigation console was displaying star charts from 17 different galaxies. "Do it," he said. The Prometheus. Unbound moved closer, and suddenly everything returned to normal. Gravity pointed down. Time moved forward. The color blue stopped tasting like mathematics. "Thank you," Kextar said quietly. "You're welcome. Now get your ship out of here before the instabilities return." Meanwhile, the effects of the Titan cannon were spreading beyond the battle zone. On Hegemony Prime, the capital world of the galactic government, emergency sessions were being called at all hours. Reports flooded in from across the sector describing impossible phenomena. Chancellor Vexana, leader of the Hegemony Council, stood before a gathering of the galaxy's most powerful beings. Representatives from 12 species filled the great hall, but for the first time in centuries they looked afraid. "What are we dealing with?" she asked the chief science advisor. "Something unprecedented," the advisor replied. He was ancient, even by the standards of his long-lived species. "The humans have demonstrated the ability to weaponize the fundamental forces of reality. The implications are staggering." "Explain." "It in terms I can understand. Imagine if someone gave a child the ability to change the laws of mathematics. 2 plus 2 might equal 7 in their presence. Multiplication might work backward. The concept of number itself might cease to exist." "And that's what the humans can do to physics?" "Apparently, yes. Our physicists are calling it applied, exotic reality manipulation. The humans have learned to convince the universe that its own rules are optional." In the hall, murmurs of fear rippled through the assembled representatives. The Keth delegation, known for their military might, looked particularly shaken. How do we fight an enemy that can change the rules of existence? Asked General Thexmore of the Keth. We don't, the science advisor replied simply. You cannot wage war against an opponent who can decide that your weapons don't work, your ships don't exist, and your fundamental understanding of reality is wrong. Chancellor Vexana felt the weight of leadership pressing down on her. The hegemony had ruled the galaxy for millennia because they had the most advanced technology and the largest fleets. But technology was useless against an enemy who could rewrite the laws that made technology possible. What do they want? She asked. According to their communications, they want us to leave human space alone. They're not demanding tribute or territory. They're not trying to conquer us. They just want to be left in peace. And if we refuse? The science advisor gestured to a holographic display showing the battle zone around Earth. Ships drifted helplessly through regions where physics had gone insane. Some vessels existed in multiple places at once. Others flickered between dimensions like dying lights. Then they will demonstrate their capabilities again. And next time, they might not limit themselves to military targets. Across the galaxy, similar conversations were taking place on hundreds of worlds. Ancient artificial intelligences that had slept for eons awakened to analyze the threat. Civilizations that had fought wars for millions of years suddenly found themselves united in terror. On Earth, Captain Chen received reports from across human space about the effects of the Titan cannon. Captain, her science officer said, we're getting reports of physics instabilities as far away as the Centauri system. Faster-than-light travel is becoming unreliable throughout the sector. How bad is it? Some ships are arriving at their destinations before they left. Others are emerging from hyperspace in parallel universes. The Merchant Guild has suspended all non-essential travel until the instabilities settle down. Chen rubbed her temples. She had known the Titan cannon would have side effects, but seeing them in practice was sobering. Any word from the hegemony fleet? Admiral Zexathara has withdrawn her remaining ships to the edge of the system. They're not trying to approach Earth, but they're not leaving either. I think they're afraid to use their faster-than-light drives. Smart of them. How long until the instabilities fade? Unknown, Captain. Dr. Webb estimates anywhere from 6 months to 6 years. We've never fired the weapon before, so we're learning as we go. Chen nodded. The Titan cannon had worked exactly as designed. It had stopped the hegemony fleet and demonstrated humanity's power, but it had also created a mess that would take years to clean up. The galaxy was learning a hard lesson. Humanity would not be conquered, enslaved, or destroyed. But they were also learning that humans were reasonable people who didn't want to rule the galaxy. They just wanted to be left alone to build impossible things and break the laws of physics in peace. The question now was whether the hegemony would be smart enough to accept that arrangement. 6 months after the Battle of Sol, the galaxy looked very different. Captain Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of the Prometheus Unbound, watching repair crews work on a damaged hegemony vessel. The alien ship hung in space like a broken bird, its hull twisted into shapes that had taken 3 weeks to figure out how to fix. Captain, Commander Park said, joining her at the viewport. The Keth cruiser Eternal Vigilance is requesting permission to approach. Granted. How are their repairs coming? Dr. Webb says another 2 days. Their ship got caught in a temporal loop when they tried to jump to hyperspace last week. Their crew experienced the same 5 minutes 847 times before we could stabilize. Them, Chen nodded. It was the same story across the sector. The physics instabilities caused by the Titan cannon had made space travel a nightmare for everyone. Ships that tried to use faster-than-light drives found themselves scattered across time and space like cosmic dice thrown by a mad god. The irony wasn't lost on her. Humanity had built the ultimate weapon to defend themselves, and now they spent most of their time helping their former enemies deal with the consequences. Captain, her communications officer called out, incoming message from Earth. It's Admiral Webb. Dr. Marcus Webb had been promoted after the battle, though he insisted he was still more comfortable with a lab coat than with Admiral's stripes. His face appeared on the main screen, looking tired but satisfied. "Sarah," he said, "I've got news from the Hegemony Council meeting." Good news or bad news? That depends on your perspective. They've officially dissolved the hegemony as a military alliance. Each species is going back to governing their own space. Chen raised an eyebrow. That's certainly a change. It gets better. Chancellor Vexana has personally requested a meeting with human representatives. They want to discuss trade agreements and mutual defense pacts. Mutual defense? 6 months ago they were trying to conquer us. Webb smiled. Funny how attitudes change when you realize the other side can rewrite reality. Also, 3 species have formally requested access to human physics research. They want to learn how to adapt their technology to the new reality. Through the viewport, Chen watched the Keth cruiser slowly approach. Its captain, Kekstar, had been one of the first enemy officers to accept human help after his ship got caught in the reality disruption. Now he was helping coordinate rescue operations for other vessels. It was strange how war could turn into cooperation so quickly. "Any word on the other Titan-class vessels?" Chen asked, still sleeping peacefully in the ice, though Admiral Reeves thinks we should build more, just in case. Let's hope we never need them. The truth was, humanity didn't want to rule the galaxy. They had built the Titan-class ships because they refused to be ruled by anyone else. The weapons were powerful enough to break the universe, but their real strength was in never having to be used again. Word had spread quickly through the galactic community. Humanity had 12 more ships like the Prometheus Unbound hidden in the ice of Europa. Nobody wanted to test whether that was true. On Hegemony Prime, former Chancellor Vexana met with her species' new government. The title of Chancellor no longer existed. In its place, the Ethereals had created a Council of Equals, with representatives from all the major galactic civilizations. The human delegation has agreed to share their reality stabilization technology, she announced to the assembled representatives. In exchange, we're providing them with our star mapping data and trade route information. General Thexmore of the Keth leaned forward. "Are we really going to trust them with our most sensitive information?" "General," Vexana replied, "they could have destroyed our entire civilization with a single shot. Instead, they've spent the last 6 months helping us repair the damage from their own weapon. I think we can trust them with star charts." The Keth general grumbled, but didn't argue. Everyone in the room had seen the reports from the battle zone. The humans could have pressed their advantage, conquered worlds, demanded tribute. Instead, they had offered technical assistance and humanitarian aid. It was the most terrifying display of power any of them had ever witnessed. The power to destroy everything, combined with the wisdom not to use it. "What about their expansion into our space?" asked Ambassador Kelthan of the Nexus Collective. "They're not expanding into our space," Vexana replied. "They're expanding into empty space that we claimed but never colonized. The difference is important. But the principle is that we tried to enforce our laws on a species that could rewrite the laws of physics. We lost. Badly." Vexana's voice carried the weight of bitter experience. "The humans have made it clear they're willing to coexist peacefully with anyone who doesn't try to enslave them. I suggest we take them up on that offer." Meanwhile, in the Outer Rim territories, humanity continued its expansion into the stars. But now they did so as partners rather than invaders. Captain Maria Santos stood on the bridge of the exploration vessel New Horizons, watching a joint human-alien colony ship approach a pristine world. Half the colonists were human. The other half were refugees from species that had lost their homeworlds during the Hegemony Wars. "Beautiful planet," said her first officer, a Keth named Hexton, who had joined her crew after the battle. "Good atmosphere, rich soil, plenty of water." "Room for everyone," Santos agreed. "The humans will take the northern continent. The Ethereals want the floating islands and the Nexus Collective prefers the underwater cities anyway. It was working better than anyone had expected. Humans were good at making dead worlds livable. Other species had technologies that could make livable worlds. Paradise. Together, they were creating something new, a galactic community based on cooperation rather than conquest. "Captain," the communications officer called out, "we're receiving a priority message from Earth." "Put it through." Admiral Chen's face appeared on the screen. She was back on Earth now, overseeing the integration of human and alien technologies. "Maria," she said, "I wanted to give you a heads up. We're getting reports of an unknown fleet approaching from the galactic core. Long-range sensors suggest they're not from any known species." Santos felt a chill. "How big?" "Big enough to be a problem. We're bringing the Prometheus Unbound out of dock just in case. Do you think they're hostile?" "Unknown. But if they are, at least we know our big stick still works." Santos smiled grimly. The Prometheus Unbound had become famous throughout the galaxy, not just as a weapon, but as a symbol. It represented humanity's willingness to defend itself and its allies against any threat. "Understood, Admiral. We'll keep our eyes open out here." The screen went dark, and Santos turned to her mixed crew of humans and aliens. "You heard the Admiral," she said. "Unknown contacts approaching from the core. All ships in the sector are to maintain defensive readiness and report any unusual activity." Hexton nodded. "Do you think this new fleet will be like the hegemony?" "I don't know," Santos replied. "But if they are, they're about to learn the same lesson the hegemony did." "Which is?" Santos looked out at the stars, where human and alien ships worked together to build a better future. "That humanity doesn't start fights," she said, "but we finish them." Deep in the ice of Europa, 11 Titan-class vessels slept peacefully. Their reality-warping engines were cold and silent. Their weapons were powered down. They looked like monuments to a war that was already over. But they were ready. The galaxy had learned to respect humanity, not because humans were the strongest or the smartest or the most advanced. They had learned to respect humanity because humans were the species that could break the universe if they had to, but chose not to. It was a lesson that would echo through the stars for generations to come. There are some species you can conquer, some you can destroy, and some you should just leave alone. Humanity had proven they belonged in the third category, and everyone in the galaxy was better off for it.